Good to see everyone this afternoon. Good to see our visitors again. Good to see Brother Worley. I heard some vicious rumor that Denise made a mistake. I know that's not true. That's impossible. All you have to do is ask her. We've been talking about the plagues of Egypt. I will say that our end is a lot closer than the beginning. So, you know, when we talk about these judgments in the form of plagues that come upon Egypt, we've heard them numerous times, probably from little children in grade school. We've heard about these, but they happened. We didn't see it, but we know it took place. And if you were an Egyptian at this time, you might have thought this was the end of the world. If you were one of the Hebrew children, you were thinking that hopefully and soon our deliverance will be. And the purpose for the plagues was to bring the Israelites out of Egyptian bondage. But it was also to prove to the world, to the Egyptians, and to the Israelites, that there was only one true God. Now, Egypt had, some have thought, a couple thousands of gods. And they weren't gods. They were idols. They weren't real. However, they believed in them. And God would disprove that. And there were some of the Egyptians who believed what they saw. They saw the evidence. And when we think about these plagues, there was evidence that would prove to them, this is Jehovah's God's doing this. There was the prediction. God would predict when a plague would come upon, and sometimes even he would tell them this is when it's going to end as well. The intensification, these were not normal. Had they had probably plagues with some disease for the cattle, or the flies, or lice, or locusts, yes. In that part of the world, there's still that problem. But never to this degree. And we see the diversification of it. Basically, we see it taking place upon the Egyptians in Egypt, but when it came to the land of Goshen, they didn't face the majority of these plagues. So they would know without a shadow of a doubt. Even Pharaoh would know this was from Jehovah. This was from Israel's God. But a God allowed him to continue to be stiff-necked, to harden his heart. And that is the reason that God basically raised him up. Exodus 9:16. For this cause have I raised thee up, for to show in thee my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the earth. And it was declared throughout all of the earth. Even the countries around Egypt would know, maybe not immediately, but they would come to know what had taken place. Then there was the orderliness of it, the severity. As we will notice, the severity would just get worse and worse until it came to the last plague, which would be the death of the firstborn, man and animal. That would affect Egypt like nothing ever before, including Pharaoh. Well, last time we studied this, we were talking about the sixth plague, and that was the plague of boils. We're going to begin with the seventh plague this afternoon, and that was hail. Now, I know what hail's like living in Colorado. My car still has dents on it from the hail that would fall, and it fell a lot. But I never saw hail fall like they saw it. And it wasn't mixed with fire in Colorado either. And it was here. In Exodus chapter 9, let's begin in verse 18 and read this text together. Behold, tomorrow about this time, here's the prediction, I will cause it to rain a very grievous hail, such as hath not been in Egypt since the foundation thereof even until now. Here's the intensification. They had never seen hail like this before, and they would never see it again. Send therefore now, and gather thy cattle, and all that thou hast in the field, for upon every man and beast which shall be found in the field, and shall not be brought home, the hail shall come down upon them, and they shall die. He that feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his cattle flee into the houses. And we'll get back to this importance of the fear of the Lord in a little bit. And he that regarded not the word of the Lord left his servants and his cattle in the field. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch forth thine hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, upon man, and upon beast, and upon every herb of the field, throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail, very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail smote every herb of the field and brake every tree of the field. In 84, there was a hailstorm in Denver that caused $100 million worth of damage. It knocked one house off of its foundation. I remember that. So roofers had a lot of work that they were able to do. Verse 13, Dale. Verse 13, God said, once again, set Moses and Aaron and warned Pharaoh of the upcoming judgment. The prediction, as we noticed, was made in verse 18. Tomorrow about this time. Discrimination, no hail fell in Goshen. Spiritual purpose behind this all, and there was always a spiritual purpose. Isis was Egypt's agricultural god, at least one of them, though they had others. But once again, Israel's God proved that he was much more powerful than the Egyptians' gods, and this is how these idolaters at this period of time would have looked at it. We just can't match up. Our gods simply are not as strong as Israel's God. And this, the intensification was throughout all of Egypt. Never seen this kind of hail before, would never see it again. Those that feared the word of the Lord, some of Pharaoh's servants began to believe. So they would bring their servants inside where it was safe. They had heeded the warning. And they would bring their cattle inside. Not one servant died for those that feared. Those that did not fear, they left their servants out into the field and their cattle in the field to die. An unbelievably painful death. You ever been hit from hail? It stings. You don't want to be outside for very long. And yet some chose not to believe. They didn't fear God. And here you see more of this, the danger of these plagues becoming more and more severe, because here's the first account of human deaths. but those that did not fear the Lord. We know the importance of fearing God. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. I think that's the key verse in the book of Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fear, the importance of respecting, having reverence for God and His holy word, that's paramount for anyone today. And yet, most people do not respect God. They don't fear what He has to say. You remember what God said to Eli, because Eli was disobedient. He allowed his sons to get away with sin and didn't correct them. And he mentioned the importance of fearing Him. For them that honor me, I will honor, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. 1 Samuel 2:30. None of us here this day want to be lightly esteemed in God's eyes. But most of the world, from the beginning of time, have not had the fear of God in them at all. And it is still the same today. And Jesus Himself in Matthew 7:13 and 14, then thinking about how foolish, looking back upon the Egyptians, how foolish they were not to see the importance of respecting God, what did Jesus say about that? Enter ye in at the strait gate. For wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. For strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Few there be that even look for it. People are set in their ways. They have everything they want. What do I need God for? As far as fear of eternal damnation, they don't fear that. They don't even believe in it. But one day they will. You think about 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 8 and verse 9, when Jesus will return in flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not God and that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now what's going to be the outcome? They're going to be perished. They're going to be punished. They'll be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of His power. Now, again, Brother Michael mentioned about that individual who might be in Africa who never heard the gospel. It's not going to be an excuse, is it? For those who've never obeyed, they're going to be punished. They've had opportunities. And I think of some of us as Christians. I have known Christians who, as the saying goes, they believe in God. Sure they do. They just don't believe God. They don't believe what He has to say. If there's a sin that they really like, they just don't believe it. They believe that they're not going to get punished. It's not going to apply to them. Well, here it states, those that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, and they're not obeying the gospel, they'll pay the price. Now in verse 27 of this chapter, Pharaoh calls them back. And he tells them, I have sinned this time. I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. I think he's come quite a ways in a short period of time. Because when Moses and Aaron first came to him, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? I know not the Lord. Well, he's coming to know the one true Lord. Still stiff-necked, but at least he even starts to repent, or he states that he's repenting. It's almost like Pharaoh's playing a game with Moses and Aaron and trying to play one with God. Okay, if I say, go ahead, take these plagues away and I'll let you go, he's not going to do it. He just says that to get these plagues to go away for a period of time. Then he hardens his heart all over again. And even Moses and Aaron predicted that Pharaoh would not keep his word, and he did not. He and his servants there in the palace hardened their hearts after the hail stopped. But what a severe penalty. You do any kind of a history about what was grown at this period of time and the times of the year that it was growing, they lost a crop. It wasn't just money either, revenue that they lost. They were losing a food source. They lost the cattle. They lost the flax. They lost barley. It was ready to be harvested. It was gone. Most importantly, human life was taken because they did not fear God. The 8th plague was the locusts. If they had anything left over, guess what? They were going to lose that. I have seen pictures of this tree with leaves all over the place. It was a before, and then there was the after picture of the same tree after locusts came by. There's nothing there. It's stripped of every leaf. It looked like even some of the bark was removed. And they still have trouble with locusts in the Middle East and in Africa today. But nothing like they experienced, the Egyptians experienced all those years ago. Exodus chapter 10. Let's read verses 12 to 15. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come up upon the land of Egypt and eat every herb of the land, even all that the hail hath left. And Moses stretched forth his rod over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night, and when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. And the locusts went up all over the land of Egypt, and rested in all the coast of Egypt. Very grievous were they. Before them there were no such locusts as they, neither after them shall be such. There's your intensification. Never seen it like this before, never seen it since. Verse 15, for they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened. And they did eat every herb of the land, and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left. And there remained not any green thing in the trees or in the herbs of the field through all the land of Egypt. The land looked dark. That was the locust crawling on every inch of the land. Now they were seeing this. And by the way, did it happen in Goshen? No. They would have known that as well. Israel's God's punishing us. It's protecting them, the Israelites. Now the prediction came about, going back to verse 4, tomorrow will I bring the locusts into the field. The intensification we have already mentioned, they covered the face of the whole earth so that the land was darkened. The spiritual purpose behind this as well. Again, always a spiritual purpose with these plagues. Serapia was Egypt's god that would protect the land from locusts. Well, that god must have been sleeping that day, or it was off on a long, strange voyage. Maybe he didn't hear. But Israel's God was proven to be stronger once again. The crop loss was now complete. Imagine looking over Egypt and not seeing one green leaf. Nothing green whatsoever was left. Now they state that after the flax and the barley, what would come up next was rye and wheat. So the rye and wheat was getting ready to be harvested, but they would not be able to harvest it. It wasn't just a loss of revenue. It's getting to the point where, what are we going to eat? Lost the barley. Now they've lost the rye. They've lost the wheat. What are we going to do for a food source? Now, we've talked about the purpose of the plagues for the Egyptians. There was also a purpose for the plagues upon Israel. Exodus chapter 10, verse 2. Here's the reason for them. And that thou mayest tell in the ears of thy son, and of thy son's son, what things I have wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that ye may know how that I am the Lord. What took place was to be handed down from one generation to the next generation, word of mouth, and also written down in the Word of God. From time to time, different passages would bring up for the Israelites these instances, what took place. You remember that Stephen even referenced it in Acts chapter 7 of what God did for Israel, bringing them out of Egyptian bondage. So they wouldn't forget, and after thousands of years, we are still talking about those events. These events were true. This is not some story, this is an account. These things actually happened. Actually happened. Now, here's where also you begin seeing some grumbling by Pharaoh's higher-ups in the courts. In verse 7, for example, and Pharaoh's servant said unto him, how long shall this man be a snare unto us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Now watch this. Knowest thou not yet that Egypt is destroyed? They could see it. He refused to. Deep down, I believe he did. He just refused to. So Pharaoh tries to compromise with Moses. And he says, okay, the men can go. But the women and the children, they have to stay here. The livestock, they have to stay here as well. But that wasn't the demand that God made through Moses to give to Pharaoh. It was all the people to leave. So he wasn't willing to completely compromise, but he would. And of course, Moses would not agree to it, so the plague came upon them. And a severe plague. No crops left. None. Unless they had some grain hidden away, it was gone. But by hardening his heart, Pharaoh was basically destroying his own people and his own nation. That's what he was doing. That's pride. Pride. And of course, the scriptures have absolutely nothing to say about pride. It's everywhere. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall, Proverbs 16:18. Well, he was being proud before he and his people were destroyed. You cannot fight God and win. You can't. Again, Pharaoh quickly calls Moses and Aaron back. Verses 16 and 17, we read of this. And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste. And he said, I have sinned against the Lord your God, now watch it, and against you. Well, that's a first. Now therefore forgive, I pray thee, my sin only this once, and entreat the Lord your God that he may take away from me this death only. That's how he referred to the locust. He referred to it as death. And that's what it was for the Egyptians. So, of course, Moses, he left. But here he is repenting before them, before the one true God. Moses left and entreated God that the plague would be removed. And we read about an exceeding strong west wind, verse 19, American Standard Version, blew the locusts into the Red Sea. Now, if you're an Egyptian, you've seen the locusts come in a waves that you'd never seen before. There's nothing left. Now you see Moses and Aaron going outside the palace and putting a stop to the plague. And you have this very strong western wind that was pushing the locusts out of Egypt to die in the Red Sea. There wasn't one left in Egypt. Now, what would you be thinking? There has to only be the one true God. And some of them did believe that. And when Israel left Egypt, some of them went with them. But as amazing as the appearance of the locust to begin with, had to be just as amazing as how they left. And the locusts were removed, and the danger was removed, and Pharaoh once again hardened his heart. Now this brings us to the 9th plague. Now this is found in Exodus chapter 10. We'll read in verse 21. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. There are certain things that human beings are naturally afraid of. One is burning yourself. Medical doctors have stated that burns, especially severe burns, is the worst pain that a person can experience. The other thing that we fear is total darkness. Complete or outer darkness. And both of these things will be experienced by people who spend all eternity in hell. That fire that will not go out, where the worm dieth not. Outer darkness, because one has been completely removed from the glory of God. Darkness so deep, so strong, you can feel it. I'm sure we have all heard the countless stories of people who've gone into some of these caves or these caverns in the United States. And you're really going down quite a ways. And they don't generally like to turn off the lights. They'll give people warning, but they don't generally like to do it when young children are there. But they'll turn off the lights, and you literally can feel the darkness. You can't see your hand in front of your face. You can't see the person next to you. It's scary. It would scare me. This is the kind of the way it was. The intensification. They knew what darkness was. At night it got dark, but they would have the moon. They would have the stars that would shed some kind of light, but they wouldn't be able to see anything. The prediction, there was no prediction. So the Egyptians had no warning with this plague whatsoever. wherever they were at, hopefully in their homes. But if they weren't, they were stuck wherever they were. They were in place. You know, you think about in your own home, even if it's pitch black, you know that room, you know where the door is. Occasionally you'll still stub your toe, but you have some idea where everything is. No work, no commerce going on at this period of time. Wherever they were, that's where they stayed for 3 days. What about Goshen? Well, they still had light in their dwellings. It didn't affect them. At least they would have light in their homes. But the Egyptians would not. Stories that Israel would tell down through the years about these events. Psalm 105, verse 26 through 38. Acts chapter 7, again, what Stephen stated about this. The spiritual purpose. Ra. Amen, Ra. Ra was the most powerful god that the Egyptians had. The most prominent. This was the sun god. This was the god of light that was always fighting the darkness. Once again, he didn't show up. He wasn't there. He was absolutely powerless against Jehovah. Well, Pharaoh attempted one more compromise. This is in verse 24. But basically what he states, the men can leave, the women can leave, the children can leave, but the livestock, they have to stay behind. Of course, Moses objected to that. They needed the livestock for the sacrifices. But that wasn't the purpose of Pharaoh saying that. I believe the purpose was knowing that the livestock were left behind in Egypt, the Hebrew children would come back to get them. He did not want to get rid of his slave labor. He wanted to keep it. Even if it meant he was destroying his own countrymen. Proud, arrogant. Remember, he thought himself as God. And here comes Moses and Aaron in demanding what needed to be done, and they were the ones who were giving the orders. It wasn't Israel. Verse 26. Here he explains to Pharaoh, our cattle also shall go with us. There shall not an hoof be left behind. What a memorable statement from Moses. Not going to be left behind. Everyone and everything is going with us. Moses wasn't going to budge. Once again, Pharaoh was stiff-necked. Verse 28, and Pharaoh said unto him, get thee from me, take heed to thyself, see my face no more, for in that day thou seest my face, thou shalt die. Now notice what Moses had to reply. Thou hast spoken well. I will see thy face again no more. There's a lot of types and shadows that is mentioned about Egypt and Israel, about their deliverance from the Egyptian bondage. Pharaoh has many times been thought of as a type of Satan, the devil. And the Satan is always trying to get us to compromise. He understands that he could not stop man from worshiping, but he's okay with that. What he tells people is, well, go ahead and worship. Join the church of your choice. But he doesn't want them to worship in the one true church. And he knows what that is. It's the Lord's church. Don't go there. Or for those of us who are Christians, sure, go ahead and worship, but you don't have to do it all the time. You deserve some time off. And as a Christian, don't be so faithful. Don't forget to enjoy those pleasures of sin, even though it is for a season. And some Christians do that. They give in to it. Egypt is often referred to as a type of sin that we have to come out of to be faithful and true to God. Satan appears in all kinds of forms, in all kinds of manners. Will always try to trip us up, will always try to get us to compromise. A little here, a little there. The only way for us to be faithful children of God is, as Israel did, we have to come completely out of sin. Believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Repent of our sins. To change our life. To bend our stubborn will and bring it into subjection to God's will. To confess his name before others. And to be baptized for the remission of sins. That's the easy part. The hard part is remaining faithful for the rest of our lives. And that's the only way that we'll be able to see the Lord, spend all eternity in heaven. We've not been doing that. Why not start today? Why not make that change today? You're not a Christian, become one. If you are, but you haven't been as faithful as you need to be, start today. You'll never find a better time. If you need the prayers of the church on your behalf, let it be known, and we will pray for you. Let's all stand and sing.